Good morning. Welcome back. So for the next 2 to 3 days, I am going to prove to you that the defendant shot and killed his wife of 13 years, Rosa Kramer. It happened about 6 a.m. on July the 23rd, 2024, at the marital residence, 2641 Hillcrest Avenue in Pensacola. Now, the defendant is charged with first-degree premeditated murder, which means I have to prove to you that the defendant killed her, and then at the time that he killed her, he had it in his mind, he had made the decision before he did the act to kill her. That's premeditated murder. So over the course of the next 3 days, you are going to hear a lot of evidence in a lot of different forms that there is trouble in their marriage. You're going to see and hear evidence, lots of messages, text messages, Facebook messages between the two of them. You'll hear from Rosa's family members about, that they were aware that there were issues in the marriage. You'll hear from the defendant's coworker. The defendant was a stalker overnight shift stalker at PetSmart, and he worked part-time. He told his manager there at the PetSmart 2 or 3 months before Rosa's death that they were having trouble, and that he knew his wife was going to leave him. Now, the decedent in the case, Rosa, she was a phlebotomist, and she was distressed by the breakdown of her marriage. She was depressed. She'd either taken some leave from work or tried to take leave from work and lost her job. At the time she died, she wasn't working. There were money troubles in the marriage. There's a house in the marriage. There are bills in the marriage. There were all these things that were contributing to the marital stress, and the defendant was very upset about it. You'll hear that about a week or two before her death, Rosa moved out of the house. She moved in with her dad and had been staying there. And during the time of her absence before her death, from the time she left to the time she was killed, the marital stress just continued to build. And you'll see the messages between Rosa and Tim about that. Now, it all sort of comes to a head on July the 22nd. On July the 22nd, Rosa had sent the defendant an email where she apparently said she was done, that it was over. And you'll see the communications, some of the communications between them on the 22nd, mainly from him, because she doesn't really respond a lot to the defendant. And he's trying to get her to answer him. He's trying to get her to come see him. He's desperate. And ultimately, he lures her to the house. In messages on the 22nd of July, he lures her to the house with the promise of returning certain items that had belonged to her deceased mother. And he tells her to come first thing in the morning, so that we don't have to see each other, because he would still be at work. Remember, he worked overnights at the PetSmart. On July the 23rd, he was supposed to work from 3 a.m. to 8 a.m. And he did. He came to work at 3 a.m. on July the 23rd, and you'll see the PetSmart video where he gets to work. But then he left at 4:25 in the morning, and he traveled home. And when he got back to the house, he didn't park in the driveway. He pulled his car into the back of the house, moved his truck behind the house. And this is a house that doesn't have a garage. It's not a house where they typically parked in the backyard. He had to open the fence, drive the car back there, close the fence back. And he waited for her in the house. On the morning of the 23rd, she got up early. She told her dad she was going to go over to the house to pick up some stuff. She would be back. She was expected back to take him to the doctor's office. And she got to the house at 5:59 in the morning. Now, by 6:12 in the morning, you're going to see evidence that the defendant starts calling his sister. just blowing up her phone, kept calling her over and over again until he gets her to answer. And his sister lives in Milton. His sister's name is Dolores. At 6:47, there's a text message from the defendant to his sister that says, "You made a promise, don't go back on your word." And Dolores, his sister, responds to him, "Tim, you told me you killed her. I cannot be an accessory to this. I have a fiancé and his daughter to think about." For the rest of the day, the defendant and his sister Dolores go back and forth with the text messages for about almost 12 hours, back and forth with the text messages, talking about all of this. They discussing Rosa's death and exploring options for how they're going to explain it, or how he's going to explain it. At 7:40 in the morning, you'll see evidence that the defendant left the house and took Rosa's car over to a park a short distance away, within walking distance of the house. Drove it up to the ball field, parked it behind a dumpster where it couldn't be seen from the road, walked back to the house. And then he stays at the house, continuing to text his sister, exploring, and even he himself discounting self-defense, saying that what she had done, whatever had happened in the house, wasn't enough to rise to self-defense. Ultimately, they text back and forth, and he decides that he's going to go to his sister's house in Milton and hide out there. And he does. He does go to Milton just before 6 p.m. So most of the evidence that you're going to hear today is about how it's from the perspective of Rosa's family and law enforcement, how they are, trying to figure out where she is and reporting that to law enforcement, trying to piece together what happened. And so when she doesn't return to take her father to the doctor's office, he gets concerned. He calls his other daughter, Rosa's sister, Lisa. They start text messaging to each other, and Lisa tries to reach Rosa, tries calling, tries texting, can't get a hold of her, ultimately tries contacting her on Facebook, and there's an exchange allegedly between Lisa and Rosa. But Lisa starts to suspect, and rightly so, that it's the defendant texting her instead of Rosa, saying, "Oh, I'm at the beach. I'm just clearing my head. I'm just getting a drink." And this goes on for a few hours also. So you hear that ultimately Lisa calls the police to report her sister missing. And that's when law enforcement comes in and the missing person investigation begins. So you'll hear how that progresses. You'll hear how the officer that responds to Lisa goes over to the house, and they're looking around. Nobody's home. Nobody's there. Nobody answers. But he does discover the tire tracks in the grass behind the house, and thinks that it could be a problem. So then the investigation still continues, and you'll hear about how they find her car at the park, how they ultimately end up making entry into the house and locating her remains in the back bedroom. They found her dog there, who had also been shot. The dog at the time the dog is still, you'll hear the dog is alive and well, but the dog had been shot also, was locked in the house. And ultimately, law enforcement does find the defendant at his sister's house in Milton. And Milton PD makes contact with him just after midnight on the morning of the 24th. And you'll hear from that officer. He'll come in, and you'll be able to have the opportunity to hear the interaction through the dash cam of his vehicle, of his interaction with the defendant. And the defendant says that he hasn't seen or heard from Rosa in over a week, that Rosa had moved to her dad's house, that they were getting a divorce, that it was final, they weren't getting back together. You will see photographs of him after he's taken into custody, and in the clothes that he's wearing. He's got on a PetSmart t-shirt, and he's got on jeans, and the jeans have obvious blood splatter all over them. You're going to see crime scene photographs today. You're going to hear from the vet that examined the dog, and you will also hear from the medical examiner. Hopefully we get that far today, but you will hear from the medical examiner regarding her autopsy. Rosa was shot 4 times, twice in the head, once in the side, once in her knee. On Wednesday, we're going to start examining the defendant's phone and the contents of his phone, explore all the messages between the defendant and Rosa, between the defendant and his sister, the Facebook messages that he sent to Rosa's sister pretending to be Rosa. You will hear about the forensic analysis of the blood on his clothing matching Rosa's blood. You're also going to hear about the forensic analysis of the firearm that was located in the defendant's vehicle. There are never any perfect cases or perfect investigations. You'll hear that there was a firearm located in the defendant's vehicle, but there had to be 2 search warrants on this car. It was not located the first time when they searched the car right at the beginning of July, or right around the time this happened in July. It was located in October, but it was there in his car and it was tested, and the firearm is the one that fired the shots that killed Rosa. Lastly, you're going to hear about the geolocation analysis that's done on the defendant's cell phone records. It's going to track his movements. And you'll see that he goes to PetSmart for work early in the morning on the 23rd. You'll see that he comes home early on the 23rd. You'll see that he goes to the ballpark at 7:30, 7:40 in the morning. You'll see that he goes to Milton. All of this over the next 3 days is going to leave you with a certainty beyond a reasonable doubt. First, that the defendant killed his wife, and second, that it was from a premeditated design. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shea. Mr. Benson, you may give your opening, sir.
You are nothing but a piece of shit. Rosa slams her hand down on the dresser and looks at the gun. Oh my God, she's going to kill me. Tim inches closer to the door, hoping he can escape. Please take your stuff and just leave, said Tim. Fuck off. Rosa rushes Tim and starts hitting him, kicking him in the knees. Tim bends over. Rosa starts punching him with her fist on the back. In full survival mode, Tim pushes Rosa back, stands himself up, rushes towards the gun, staggers there, grabs it as Rosa regains her footing and charges at him again. Tim quickly fires in Rosa's direction. 14 years ago, Tim met Rosa while they both worked at Walmart. They quickly started dating, and soon they married. Initially, they lived in an apartment together on 9th Avenue, and then they purchased a home together on Hillcrest Avenue. Tim and Rosa both had children from previous marriages. They became a blended family. They adopted a dog, Cody. They had many shared interests. They both loved NASCAR. They went to races together. They liked to go to the movies. They transitioned into different jobs. Tim started working nights at PetSmart, unloading trucks. Rosa started her career as a phlebotomist, working at Baptist, then working at West Florida Hospital. As the years went by, Tim and Rosa became ships in the night. Tim worked all night, slept all day. Shared moments became scarce, and Tim and Rosa started to feel more like roommates than a married couple. They distanced from each other emotionally and physically. They were sad. They wanted to regain their footing and get back to who they once were when they first started dating. A couple of months before this, Rosa was placed on leave at work. Tim transitioned from full-time to part-time at PetSmart. There was talk of therapy. Unfortunately, it never happened. 2 weeks before this, Rosa left. She took some of her belongings and went to live with her father. As you'll see in many, many text messages, Tim and Rosa struggled during this period. It's clear they both still loved each other, but their marriage was broken. Tim begged Rosa to come back, to talk to him, to try to work it out. Both of them struggled to navigate living apart. Rosa came to the house a couple of times to talk, to gather some of her belongings, but the relationship could not be fixed with just a couple of conversations. Rosa continued to remove her personal belongings from the home. Tim started wondering if she would ever come back and how he would continue to pay for the house. They were already behind on mortgage payments. On July 22nd, 2024, Tim and Rosa exchanged text messages and phone calls about some items that Rosa wanted to pick up from the home. A bowl that belonged to her mother, a photo album. They planned to meet the next day. Tim hoped that this would be another chance to talk. Tim went to work at PetSmart on the 23rd. He clocked in around 3 a.m. He had too much on his mind, and he asked to leave early. He left around 4:30 a.m. and went home. Tim parked in the driveway. He went inside, and he waited for Rosa to return home. As time went by, thinking that she wasn't coming, Tim sent Rosa some emails indicating that he was going to put her stuff outside in the trash. Shortly after 6 a.m., Cody, their dog, barks. This is a sign to Tim that someone is outside. Rosa had returned. She had parked right behind Tim. Tim goes to the front door and lets Rosa in. Rosa walks through the living room, which is just inside the front door, and positions herself at the kitchen. She turns around, and Tim can immediately tell she's upset. "What is going to happen to the house?" Rosa asks. Tim tells her, "It's going back to the bank. We're behind on the payments." Rosa offers to buy the house from Tim for $10,000. Tim declines. He took $30,000 out of his Walmart 401k for the down payment. $10,000 didn't seem fair. "What about $15,000? Tim declines, and Rosa starts to get aggravated. Tim can see Rosa's face starting to get red. She's agitated. Tim also suspects that Rosa is intoxicated. You'll hear from the medical examiner who confirms this, that Rosa had alcohol, Xanax, and THC in her blood at the time that this happened. The argument continues. Rosa cannot see why Tim won't sell his stake in the house to her. Rosa goes down the hallway and enters the marital bedroom. That's where her stuff was that she wanted to take. Tim follows, wanting to make sure that she took just her stuff and nothing else. The furniture, the things that they had purchased together, that, if they got divorced, would be divided up by the courts. Tim walks into the bedroom after Rosa. He walks past the dresser, stands by the bathroom door. Rosa is standing just inside the door and closes the door after Tim enters. Where's the bowl? Where's the photo album? Tim doesn't know, and Rosa becomes more and more agitated. Please, just take your stuff and go. Rosa becomes angrier. Rosa slams her hand down on one of their dressers. Can I at least take this? No, that will have to go through the divorce courts. The TV? No. Rosa's voice is getting louder, and she is becoming more elevated. Tim inches towards the door, seeing that this is not going to get any better. Rosa renews her request to buy the home from Tim, and Tim declines again. You are nothing but a piece of shit. Rosa slams her hand down on the dresser right next to the gun. She looks at it. Oh my God, she's going to kill me. You know the rest. Tim feared for his life when he shot Rosa. She was a black belt, and Tim had bad knees and a bad back. when Rosa looked at the gun, which Tim knew she knew how to use. They had been to the range together. Rosa had her own gun. He knew it was a life or death situation. He could not escape without turning his back to Rosa, and he did not want to put himself in such a vulnerable position. So he stood his ground. Unfortunately, when Tim fired the first 3 shots, Cody got in between Tim and Rosa. The first 3 shots passed through Cody and entered Rosa. Tim did not mean to do this, and fortunately, Cody is okay today. After the shooting, Tim was devastated. He shot and killed his wife, although it was in self-defense. He was in shock. Tim didn't know what to do. He had never been in a situation like this before, and he started to make some bad decisions. Tim moves Rosa's car to a nearby ballpark. He's trying to buy himself some time to figure out what to do. Tim starts to mop up the floor, but he doesn't get very far, and he stops. Later, Tim sees Rosa's sister is trying to reach her. He sends her some messages from Rosa's account, making it seem like Rosa is at the beach. Tim has no one else to turn to, so he reaches out to his sister, Dolores, who lived in Milton. They exchange text messages for hours before Tim drives his car to her apartment in Milton. You undoubtedly will get to see all of these messages. They're bizarre. They really are. But after you read them a few times, you'll start to see that Tim really did believe that he was defending himself, that Tim clearly does not understand the law, and you'll get to see that the sister he turned to has some mental health issues. Before leaving for Milton, Tim pulled his car into the backyard to load some of his belongings into the vehicle. He drove to Milton, where the police found him at his sister's apartment. The police quickly made up their minds about what happened. One of them even cursed Tim out, calling him a piece of shit. They searched Tim and Rosa's home. They searched the cars. They searched the apartment. They missed some crucial evidence. 2 detectives, a crime scene tech, searched Tim's car. They can't find his gun. I find it right under the front seat a few months later. You'll hear more about that. What happened here was a tragedy, but Rosa left Tim with no other choice. Tim was defending himself. Tim is not guilty.